Now joined by our pal Kenny Albert. He's helping call the Stanley Cup Final on the Westwood One Radio Network. Kenny joins us via the video call center from Boston. Kenny, thanks as always for joining us. Blues win game one. I should say the Bruins win game one 4-2. Blues were up 2-0. How come Boston was able to dominate after the first 20 minutes?
Well, guys, the Blues got off to a good start, and a lot has been made about the Bruins' rest, the 10 days off since their sweep over Carolina. And the Blues definitely came out, and they did what they wanted to do in the first period. They take a 2-0 lead early in the second, but then the tide seemed to turn. St. Louis took too many penalties. The Bruins had 5 power plays in the game, and the one scary thing, if you're a Blues fan, is that the Bruins were able to win the game despite not much offensively from their top 2 lines. Marchand had the empty net goal, but that was it. They had 2 goals from defensemen, a goal from their 4th line. But on the other side, one positive the Blues can take out of it, despite getting dominated over the last 2 periods, they were still tied with 15 minutes left in the game. And one thing about St. Louis during the playoffs, Bill and Alan, they've been so resilient. They were down in the Dallas series in round 2. They had to win a game 6 on the road to stay alive. They were down 2-1 in the San Jose series, and they've been able to come back. Jordan Binnington is 11-2 after losses this year, regular season plus the postseason. I was at the practices today, listening to head coach Craig Berube, and the Blues do a great job of putting a specific game behind them and then looking ahead and moving on and preparing for that next game.
What we know about both of these teams in the Stanley Cup Finals, they're both big and strong. They both play a physical game. But it was one of the smaller guys who I felt like Kenny had a momentum-changing play in the game. That's Torrey Krug. Without his helmet, flying down the ice, that huge hit that he throws there, the place goes nuts. And they really felt like, as you see, he gets worked over here by Perron in front of the net. Like, just takes the helmet right off. But he could have gone to the bench. Instead, no. I mean, just what a rocket this hit was and a momentum changer. Could you feel it in the building, a play like that, changing the game?
You could. The fans were obviously really into it, in particular after that hit. And there's been a lot of debate today about whether or not that should have been a charging penalty. I think the general consensus is they could have called 2 penalties. They could have sent Perron to the box for what he did to Krug at the other end of the ice, and they could have called Krug for interference. So perhaps it was a good non-call on both sides. The officials let them play, but definitely was part of the momentum shift for sure.
You know, Kenny, it was amazing to watch that game because we've touched on the fact that the Blues looked really good after the first period. Mm-hmm. Second period, the Bruins outshot St. Louis 18-3. It was really a remarkable turnaround to watch that kind of domination.
It really was. The only shot by a St. Louis forward was actually the goal scored by Tarasenko 1 minute into that second period. They had no other shots from forwards, but the Bruins turned it around. St. Louis started to take penalties, as I said. During the last 3 games of the Western Conference Final, St. Louis took only 6 penalties over 3 games, and they took 5 last night, which is way too many.
Kenny, you love trivia, and you're great at it because you have all the tidbits and all the facts. You're so well prepared. I'm going to throw one at you, see if you got an answer. Okay, there's only one Long Islander with his name on the Stanley Cup. Do you know who that is?
Rob Scuderi.
Perfect. Now, Charlie McAvoy trying to make that 2, and he gets that goal yesterday. But as you mentioned, it hasn't been the top line, or at least wasn't in Game 1. Depth is important when you get this far in the playoffs. Talk about that Bruins 4th line.
Right, and first of all, getting back to the Long Island point, Charlie McAvoy scores the 2nd Bruin goal. It was a huge goal from Long Beach, Long Island. Grew up as a Rangers fan, so he could be the 2nd Long Island native to win a Stanley Cup. But as far as the 4th line, both teams started their 4th lines, and they've both been tremendous. St. Louis, with Steen, Barbashev, and Sundqvist, they had scored a goal in 5 straight games. And we see the goal here with Noel Acciari setting up Sean Kuraly. The Bruins' 4th line had a tremendous game. Kuraly had an assist earlier, scores what proved to be the game winner here. Interesting story about Kuraly. He grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and he was a big Blue Jackets fan, and Rick Nash was one of his favorite players. Last year, he had the opportunity to play with Rick on the Bruins after the trade from the Rangers. And when Rick announced his retirement this season, Sean Kuraly sent him a text thanking him for everything that he did for him, both as a player in Columbus when Kuraly was watching him as a kid, and then as a teammate last year with the Boston Bruins.
Kenny, you, of course, were in town here in New York when John Davidson was officially introduced last Wednesday as the Rangers president. What's your reaction, and what do you think this is going to mean to the Rangers franchise?
I think it's tremendous. Bill, you and I had a chance to chat for a couple of minutes prior to the press conference, and having known JD for a long time, traveled with him and the MSG Network group for the first 10 or 12 years with the Rangers for me, when JD was still the analyst on the TV side, he has the utmost respect from basically every entity in the sport of hockey. Players, coaches, general managers, media, management, there's nobody that doesn't get along with JD. He's done just about everything in the sport. He's been a player. He's been in management now for 13 years with both St. Louis and Columbus. He was really the top analyst in the sport for about 20 years. He set the bar. He really taught other analysts how to do their homework. And JD was one of the first with a satellite dish, watching all of the games from out of town and talking to other coaches and players and preparing for the next game broadcast. And again, there aren't too many people who are as well liked as JD. You know, when you look at this series, and I tweeted this out yesterday, JD drafted 8 players when he was president and director of hockey operations for the Blues. Jordan Binnington, Vladimir Tarasenko, Colton Parayko, David Perron, right on down the line. 8 members of this Blues team were drafted by JD with St. Louis. And then on the other side, Jeff Gorton, the Rangers general manager, he drafted Brad Marchand when he was the general manager in Boston. He traded for Tuukka Rask, and he signs Zdeno Chara as a free agent. And then you have David Quinn, the Rangers head coach, who coached Charlie McAvoy and coached Matt Grzelcyk in college at BU, coached Ryan O'Reilly with the Colorado Avalanche. So there are a lot of fingerprints on this series from Ranger management, with JD leading the way as such an integral member of the Blues when they drafted nearly half of their current team.
So, Kenny, Alan thought he was going to be able to stump you, but we all know that Kenny Albert cannot be stumped.
I will not stop trying, Kenny. I will not stop trying.
I have one more for you guys, and I know, Alan, that you know this, but a lot of people in the media room at the press conference earlier today were surprised when Craig Berube, the coach of the Blues, was asked about Zdeno Chara. And, Alan, you were around covering the Islanders back in the early 2000s, and Berube pointed out that he was a teammate of Chara with the Islanders, and a lot of people in the room were not aware of that.
2000, 2001, I was covering that team, and it was incredible to think Chara at that age, he would, after games, I'd sit with him, and he would just say, I don't know what I'm doing out there, and I'd walk away saying, this guy's never going to make it. How'd that work out?
And here he is, 42 years of age, first ballot Hall of Famer for sure.
Norris Trophy, Stanley Cup, and everything else, yeah.
Kenny, as always, we appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the Cup Final. I'm sure we'll be talking to you down the line. For more great videos from the MSG 150, check out right there. And remember, our show is on Monday through Thursday, 8 to 10:30 p.m. on MSG Network and MSG Go.